So this is Baruch Fleischman here. I'm reading from the Likutei Moharan. This is the second Torah. And it's very nicely enumerated, that is. And let's see what we can get as we finish this second Torah. So the Rebbe at the end brought in this idea. He says, Rabbi Baba Chana recounted, he told this story, once while traveling on a ship, we saw this fish. It had sand on its back, and a meadow sprouted up. Now, this is the idea of, I think that what he's saying is that in our world, the situation in which we find ourselves really looks hopeless. So that's like a fish which is dried up, and it's like it's dead. It has grass growing on its back. Thinking it to be dry land, that there was nothing here, but at any rate we ascended, we went onto it, and we baked and we cooked on its back. Now the Mefarshim are saying over here that meant that they kept praying. Even though the things looked bad, they kept playing. And this is the concept in Kabbalah of Mayim Nukfin, of prayers from the bottom. So they started and they kept doing it anyway. When it became hot, in other words, the prayers really started to really get serious, it turned over and it faced them, which is the concept of the face of God shining on them. Were it not that we were near the ship, we would have drowned. So I'm not sure exactly what that means. Let's see what he says over here. So he said, we're not for the ship. This corresponds to kindness. If it wasn't for the kindness that God showed us as a result of our prayers, and he turned his face to us, if it was not for that kindness, we would have drowned. So that kindness is there. It's a two-way street. Now let's see if we get back to the end over here. We had a lot of discussions, and let's see what this says. And I bring it down closer because the print is small. It says, in discussing a number of the concepts mentioned in this lesson, Reb Nosson concludes a person worthy of the sword of prayer must understand how to do battle with it. So he says this is a definite statement that prayer is crucial. Deflecting it neither right nor left. We learned from this that when a person considers the seemingly endless nature of the present exile in which we're now living in an exile that is going the wrong direction. I hope that it will correct itself. He must not mistakenly conclude that all the Jewish people's prayers for salvation are for naught. They don't work. God forbid. This would be inclining to the left. Well, inclining to the left is the side of din in Kabbalah, turning God's attribute of compassion into cruelty, that is, if the balanced line, whereas the concept of compassion is the middle between pure goodness or pure gift and pure punishment. He says that's compassion, but you could turn that compassion to the left, which is cruel, as though the Holy One turns a deaf ear to our prayers. Conversely, a person should not mistakenly conclude that since without God's kindness, it is impossible to accomplish anything through prayer. There is no point in expending any effort on prayer. Now let me read this again because I didn't read it right. He says, conversely, a person should not mistakenly conclude that since without God's kindness, it is impossible to accomplish anything through prayer. So you only can accomplish something because God is kind. There's no point in expending any efforts on prayer. Relying totally upon God's kindness is inclining mistakenly to the right. The truth is, which is the active sign of kindness, a prayer must take the balanced path, doing both. He must constantly increase his efforts at prayer, believing that not one of his entreaties is ever in vain. And at the same time, he must bear in mind that without God's kindness, he is incapable of achieving anything despite all his efforts and devotions. So it goes both ways. It is that you have to have the efforts, because the din is the concept of girding your loins or getting ready to do something. You're going to do something and start praying. But on the other hand, you have to also have the concept of God has to meet you halfway. He has to bring his kindness to you. So he said, but when we Jews do our part and constantly pray for salvation, then God surely does his part, and for his own sake bestows kindness upon us and redeems us. The way to attain this balance, our mishpat, is through charity. This is why we give charity before praying, just as we distribute bounty through our acts of charity, and this enables us to pray. So too our prayers give God cause and reason to answer our entreaties and send us the bounty we seek. This is Baruch Fleischman, that is Rabbi Nachman of Breslev, on prayer.